Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the New Filmmakers LA Virtual Film Festival powered by Seed and Spark. My name is Boyana Sandic, and I'm the Programming Director at New Filmmakers LA. For those of you who don't already know us, we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization that provides monthly opportunities like this one to the independent film community and film professionals. I'd like to start this session by first taking a moment to acknowledge that NFMLA provides a safe space for communities from all walks of life and from all backgrounds. You are welcome here. No matter who you are. Academic delegations and community collaborators have been a huge part of making this particular event come together. So in addition to the Academy as our presenting partner in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, we'd also like to recognize our academic delegation partners that are listed on the screen right now, all of whom have brought 30 or more students and faculty to this weekend's festival lineup. So as I read your school's name, I would encourage you to make your presence known by dropping your name in the chat and the name of the school that you're representing, so we can give you a round of applause. So we have joining us today Art Center College of Design, ASU Film Spark, CSU Dominguez Hills, CSU Fullerton, CSU Long Beach, CSU Los Angeles, CSU Northridge, Chapman University's Dodge College, Emerson College LA, Hussien College LA, LA City College, Mount San Antonio College, New York Film Academy, Occidental College, Los Angeles Film School, UCLA Latin American Institute, UCLA TFT, USC School of Cinematic Arts. So thank you all for coming out, and thank you to all of the students, faculty, and alumni for joining us, and also for coming out here to help us celebrate these incredible Latinx voices and participating in the professional development opportunities that are taking place as part of this program. We hope you walk away from this weekend with new insight and with new relationships. And we thank the leaders of your institutions for spearheading these delegations. We'd also like to give a shout out to all of our community collaborators that you see up on the screen right now. Thank you for your incredible partnership. And of course, a round of applause for all of our industry delegation members and moderators. Thank you all. And next, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our incredible sponsors, without whom the New Filmmakers LA Film Festival and all of our events would not be possible. Starting with our co-hosts, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and especially Bettina Fisher, Tracy Dillian, and Ama, I wrote it down because I want to get her name right, Ama Jamara. We could not do this without the three of you. And while this year's program is virtual, we definitely want to get to let the Academy's theater staff know that we miss and appreciate them. We'd also like to acknowledge our monthly venue host, the South Park Center, and its parent company, LBA Realty, Executive Circle sponsors Film LA and Warner Media 150, Producer Circle sponsors BBH and HBO, Director Circle sponsors Sony Pictures Entertainment, Wells Fargo, Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, and Blackmagic Design. Our debut sponsors Creative Artists Agency, City National Bank, Los Feliz Neighborhood Council, and POV. Foundation supporters including the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce Community Foundation, the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, the California Arts Council, Sundance Institute, and Banc of California. And of course, our media partner, Screen International. So if you haven't taken a chance to review all of this weekend's festival programming, we encourage you to do so. We've got a great lineup, so please make sure to visit our website at www.nfmla.org to learn about all the other programs that we have going this weekend. And with that, I would like to introduce, before we get into this session, I'd like to introduce our friend from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Bettina Fisher, who would like to say a few words. Bettina?
Hi, thank you, Boyana, and New Filmmakers LA. Excuse me, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you to this weekend's In Focus Latinx and Hispanic Cinema. The Academy is proud to co-host this program, and believe it or not, 2020 is our 5th year of partnership with New Filmmakers LA. The time has just gone by so fast. Working at the Academy, I've been fortunate enough to be able to focus on fostering the next generation of storytellers. Every summer, the Academy hosts Academy Gold, an industry-wide diversity internship and mentoring program under the Academy brand. The program offers interns exclusive access to Academy members, industry professionals, screenings, educational panels, career prep sessions, workshops, and an exclusive industry networking experience. This summer, we were able to pivot and host the program virtually for 74 interns. And we were fortunate enough to have interns from as far away as China and Brazil to participate in the program. I'd like to encourage you all to visit our website at oscars.org for more information on the Gold program, as well as our Student Academy Awards, Nickel Fellowships in Screenwriting, our upcoming Careers in Film Summit, which is October 24th and 31st, our program on filmmakers with disabilities on October 26th, and all of our Academy programming. This weekend, thanks to the hard work of New Filmmakers LA, the talented filmmakers, our industry professionals, and the Academy's support, you'll gain valuable insight and see exciting new works by and about Latinx and the Latinx and Hispanic community. Again, thank you all so very much for being here to support this amazing program. I hope you all enjoy your experience. Now back to Boyana.
Thank you, Bettina. So to go through what we're about to experience, today's panel is going to kick off with a 60-minute moderator-led discussion with our esteemed panelists who we have here. Throughout this discussion, we encourage you to use the chat to comment and interact about what's going on. If you don't have your video on, please turn it on so that we can see you and you can see us and we can get to know each other face to face. Also, if you could change your name on Zoom to reflect your name and your title and institution or organization that you're representing, that can also help people recognize each other too, and facilitate some networking and some relationship building here. So following our moderator-led discussion, we're going to turn it over to you, our audience members, for a 30-minute interactive audience and panelist Q&A. In order to ask a question during the Q&A, simply use the raise hand feature that's available under the participants tab. And if you'd like to try it now, try finding that button, clicking the raise hand. You can practice it and we won't count this one, but just take a look and see, make sure that you can find that for when the time comes. So when you do click that during the Q&A, it's going to place you in queue to ask your question. And when it's your turn, an NFMLA staff member will unmute you. Please also make sure that you unmute yourself when they unmute you so that you can then have the floor. And once you do have the floor, we ask that you limit yourself to 1 or 2 questions maximum. That way we can get questions from as many people as possible. We recommend writing down any questions you have throughout the discussion so that you can keep track of them to ask in the Q&A. If you don't have a microphone, you can also chat us your question in the chat box and New Filmmakers LA will ask it for you. Just be sure that if you do have your video on, when you're asking your question, or when you're not asking a question, that we can see whatever's going on in the background. So, you know, audio, video, whatever we have access to, be mindful. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our moderator, Clayton Davis. Clayton is Variety's Film Awards editor. He founded and was the editor-in-chief of awardscircuit.com. He's covered awards, film, and television for more than 15 years. He's the founder and president of the Latino Entertainment Journalists Association and a member of Critics' Choice, AAFCA, and NYFCO. We're very lucky to have him. Clayton, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Is everyone this great Friday? It's Friday, thank God, and it's good to see all of you. We're going to have a really great panel today, and I'm just so excited to be with you guys and talk shop on film because I love movies and I'm obsessed with it like many of you are. So I want to give an opportunity to introduce everyone so you guys can know who you're hearing from and what we're going to be talking about. As introduced by me. So I am the New Film Awards editor at Variety. I've loved film my entire life. I'm based on the East Coast, right outside New York City. I will be very soon moving to LA next June to go hang out with you guys, but I'm not a fan of the traffic, so if you guys can take care of that before I get there, that'd be great. But let me introduce who we'll be talking with today, Adrian Ward with Banc of California. Adrian, if you could please just give a quick little introduction about yourself and what makes you tick and why you're here.
Sure. Thanks, Clayton. As Clayton said, I work for Banc of California. I manage a team that is primarily engaged with lending for film and TV production, exclusively in the independent business. I've been doing this for way longer than I thought I ever would. It's been about, next year it'll be 30 years. So seen a lot of ups and downs at that time, but always happy to join events like this, and New Filmmakers LA do such a good job in the business.
Awesome. Thank you. And with wiip, the major production company that also has a film coming out, Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon, we have Luke Rogers. Luke, give me a little introduction about yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is, you guys can hear me, yes? I'm always people on a Zoom. Great. Okay. My name is Luke Rogers. I am a motion picture executive producer at wiip Studios, which is a television and film independent studio based in Los Angeles with offices in New York and London as well. I am based in LA as well, so Clayton, we'll see you here soon. And by the way, we don't have traffic anymore because no one has anywhere to go. We just
That's the rumor. Yeah, it's all rumor.
But I have been at wiip for about 1.5 years now. Before that, I was at Creative Artists Agency in the Media Finance Group, where I was for about 8 years, 4 of which I was an agent. And I work and have worked primarily with independent film, organizing, arranging, packaging, getting all of the financing together so that movies can get up and off the ground, and then obviously figure out how those movies are going to make their way out to the world via one of many different distribution channels. So we have our, as Clayton referenced, we have our first movie, Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon, which is finishing post-production right now, and we'll see what ends up happening with, you know, film festivals next year. But very excited to be with you guys here today because film's what it's about. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So let's have a nice little discussion here and talk about the things I'm really passionate about, especially in the Latinx community. And I am, you know, full disclosure, I am half Puerto Rican, half Black. I have very much been a big voice in the access portion of film education to young people all across America. And I think one of the things that we like to start with is about that access. So can you, I guess we start with you, Adrian, because you're on the financial side. What does a package look like in order to get financing? What should young people be preparing for? You know, we all have creative juices flowing in us. What is it that we need to prepare for in order to make that dream a reality?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, we get projects through the door in all different, you know, shapes and sizes. I mean, and you know, it doesn't need to be anything particularly formal. Really, what we're looking for is at the, you know, for a point that we can be more helpful to the producer, something where they've got an idea of the finance plan that goes along with the creative side of the project. So, you know, that can look a bunch, you know, like a bunch of different things. I mean, these days we're seeing more and more projects that are simply, you know, sort of a pickup by Netflix or Amazon or someone like that. Of course, there's more sort of traditional models where there are, you know, the finance plan is broken down into pre-sales of specific territorial rights. There's the use of, you know, tax credits or a co-production structure with multiple jurisdictions, tax credits, depending on where you're shooting. You know, there might be soft money, you know, if you're going to Canada or places like that. And then there might be some equity or more risk money, you know, filling in the difference. But I think, you know, we're always, you know, we would prefer that people come to us at an earlier stage, even if they don't have all these things mapped out, because at least we can then engage in that conversation and say, okay, in order to get a bank loan, which is what we provide, there are certain things that we're going to need, and there are certain things that you can't pledge elsewhere. You can't pledge your distribution rights to an equity investor who's only putting up 50% of the budget, or something like that. You've got to have things that you can, you know, like rights or tax credits that will serve as collateral for a bank loan. So, you know, it's as much a process on our side as it is for the producer to understand how they're approaching it and how, you know, what the timeline is, what the value is in the marketplace in terms of, you know, whether they're engaging with a sales company or they go and pre-sell those distribution rights. And then we can talk about which sales companies might be most appropriate for the you know, the film based on the budget and other things. Okay. So it's a you know, it's a fairly long process, but it's better to come through the door earlier in that process than later.
Okay, so to bring Luke in this conversation, and Luke, for you, you have a very unique background, starting at a talent agency and getting now into this production space. We've seen, I think, we're in a room full of students. For some people, it just happens for them. Someone high up. I think it's that story of Lena Dunham pitching Girls, went in with it written on a napkin, and went in and got a show. And everyone was like, "Oh, that's good for you." I put 7 years into this whole production, have a whole series mapped out for 12 years, and I can't even get a meeting with someone. But you write on a napkin, it happens for you. What are some of those things, or some of those best practices, or what message should be given to these next generation of filmmakers to get around some of those things so they can get their voices heard?
Totally. I'll jump in first, and Adrian, I know you have some things with this as well. But first of all, just to dispel any notion, yes, with Lena or anything that is one of those anecdotes as well. I have never gotten a movie made off of a cocktail napkin. I don't know anyone who's gotten a movie made off of a cocktail napkin, so I would say that's the atypical experience for pretty much everyone. Yeah. I think that it's interesting that you ask, because and this isn't meant to be a massive commercial for New Filmmakers LA, but what's interesting about that is that there are programs, and I know there's some students who are here. I know there's also some filmmakers where you've made a short at this point, or any number of things. And New Filmmakers LA, Sunnet, like there are several kind of industry-wide areas where you can set yourself apart by being included in them. Now there's a film festival for every city in this country and most other countries as well. But there are a lot of really great short. Again, it depends. You can, if you have a short film and that's what you're trying to get seen, there's plenty of opportunities for that at different festivals around the world, both established kind of more like feature-length narrative film festivals, something like a Sundance or a Cannes, or Toronto isn't massive on shorts, but every one of these kind of very known international festivals is generally going to have some shorts component to it. But there is also the element too of there are areas where you can, again, be highlighted and look at or be seen by peers and by tastemakers in the industry as well. And the Academy actually does a really great job of curating those. They have what are called Academy qualifying festivals for short films. And you guys should look through that to just be familiar with, like, these are the places that the Academy is actually designated as, if your short film goes here and wins certain awards and gets a certain profile off of that, then it will then go on to qualify for the Academy Award, which obviously is that, many more movies are made than just the one that was based off of the short film that won the Academy Award every year, obviously. So it's not necessarily only about ultimately winning that prize, but it is really just about having your work seen, building a profile for yourself, really thinking about what these opportunities are to just get on tastemakers' radars with that.
Awesome. So, let me ask a question here. I think we should, bring it a little bit to the basics here. And I can see all the students here, so I'm going to use some of your names for examples. So if you hear your name, it's just because I see your name, I'm going to use it for the example here. But so Luke, my name is Santos Herrera, and I want to, get some financing for the script I wrote. What are some great avenues that I can explore to make that script that I have in my hand a reality? I know there's a lot of crowdfunding things, there's investors and banks and all that. Like, can we just really spell those out? How does Santos get his movie made? And Adrian, that's for you too. That's for both of us to all of us to talk about here.
Yeah, I mean, from the projects that we've seen over the years, if you're starting at that script level, really what I would suggest is you engage with a producer, because the producer is going to have some experience in doing a lot of the things that will progress the project, and whether that's access to agents and talent, whether it's access to financing, whether it's a bank or it's an investor, you want somebody who's gone down those roads before, if only to accelerate that process. Because if you're starting from scratch and you've got a great script in your hand, that helps a lot. But if you don't know where to go, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to just getting through people's doors and things like that. So for me, it's and the great thing now is that the world really is your oyster. You might think that producer is here in LA or in New York, but the chances are that it might be a producer in Toronto or London or Sydney, just because there's, those areas, so certainly right now, there's more activity happening, in those places than there is around the US. So I think in the hands of an experienced producer, and you're going to learn from that as you go through those stages, and then eventually, the second project, the third project, maybe you as an individual want to do more of that work. But I think that's really key, that, the producer tends to be the sort of fulcrum for the entire, project in pulling all those different disciplines together.
Luke? Anything?
I would launch off that. I absolutely agree with that. I think having your producer is really, especially as a first-time filmmaker, having a solid producer, and even really looking at who the producers are that you're working with and dialoguing with. There are producers that are really good, specifically working with younger filmmakers, and young, I mean in terms of experience. Obviously, you can start making films at any point in your life, but there are definitely producers where you're seeing them have 3-4 movies every few years at Sundance, at places like NewFilmmakers LA, at places where they are highlighting new voices and upcoming voices. Those are the people that you really want to target, because there's plenty of producers who you're looking at and they're really at the absolute, kind of pinnacle of the industry, and they've worked for many, many years to get there. I think generally speaking, that's more often than not, they're not going to leap at the opportunity to work with very, very emerging filmmakers. So I think it's really about thinking about what your first movie is going to be, pairing with a producer who's really a co-conspirator in that, right? Like a true partner in terms of that. And to also kind of to think about in terms of like where you would find those producers, how you would get linked up with those producers. Again, it's about, if you have Clayton, you're talking about a script, right? Like you have a complete...
or anything, yeah, anything to get your film. But if you have the script, if you're a writer, if you're a director, whatever the case may be, to get that whatever angle that you're at.
Totally. Let's take it as if it's a script. Let's take it as if it's a completed script. I would recommend looking at 3 places, which is the Blacklist, and then looking at the Sundance Labs, and then also looking at independent filmmaker project in New York every year. Those are 3 places. There are other places as well, don't get me wrong. But those are 3 places that are thought of very, very highly in terms of finding the next kind of up and coming talent, the next voices, breaking those kinds of things. They have a very good track record of also finding, converting, and therefore every year they have people who are converting from being a new filmmaker with a new script to, a couple years down the line, they have something in hand where people can actually see. Those are great opportunities and really ways where you can distinguish yourself and set yourself apart and get connected to those producers. And if you have a short, which sometimes that can go in conjunction with that script, again, I would think about those film festivals too, where you are, thinking with that. I will say those lists again. And sorry, if somebody types a question, I'm completely overwhelmed by everything. So if I miss you, raise your hand.
Too many faces. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the three things: Sundance Labs, independent filmmaker project, and then the Blacklist.
Got it. And to bring that now to where people are exploring, because obviously, we hear Sundance happen in January every year, and then there's always the Independent Spirit Awards. I'm looking at the awards angle. But what are these different, like what kind of filmmakers are tapping into each one of those? So like Lulu Wang, her path to the farewell, like is obviously gonna be different than like Alfonso Cuarón trying to make Roma. So like what kind of filmmakers explore those different pathways? Is there like a type, quote unquote, that goes its certain pathway? I guess, Adrian, you can also weigh in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we've seen, and talking with, a lot of filmmakers at various festivals is it's really, at some point, it's really just getting out there and submitting, your project, your script, whatever it is, to these various organizations and festivals. And I think, there'll be a sort of a process where there'll be a handful of them that will, come out of that, say, yes, this is the type of thing that we're looking for, whatever that story is, or, what it represents. So, there are a lot of the markets that we attend, like you mentioned, sort of Cannes and Toronto and American film market are more sort of on the, from our point of view, it's more the buying and the selling, but there are festival, components in most of those where we try and establish relationships, because for us, the emerging filmmakers today are going to be potentially clients of the bank, down the road when they're getting, financing together at that point. But I think depending on what the project is, and where it's targeted, I think you'll find that certain festivals, certain events, certain programs, whether, the ones that Luke mentions, or something like Women in Film, they're looking for a certain type of project that they can then, they can be helpful with.
Luke, did you want to add anything to that?
No.
No, they're good. Awesome. Let's talk about like anyone can find an investor, right? Like I think that's we can all attest. Like anyone who's willing to put that investment in you, that that part is there. But what are some of the elements that or some of the standards that people need to meet in order to get a loan? When they obviously you can find like famous story of Spike Lee, his grandmother funded She's Gotta Have It, like to get it through the lab and get it out, and so you can live off of it, so you can finish it, so not everyone has grandma that like puts their their money away for years just so they can make your dreams come true. So what are some of those standards they need to meet? What should they be preparing for?
Well, so like I said earlier, I mean, there's, depending on what your finance plan is, if it's, outside of Netflix writing you a check for the production, or you've got, a rich family member, it's really about creating value in the project. And there's various ways of doing that. So, first of all, it's all about getting bang for your buck in terms of the creative elements. So, looking for those actors, director, you want to be in the movie, but making sure that they fit within the budget. You don't want to overpay, because as soon as you start throwing money at above the line, it's it's difficult to get that back at this market. For the most part, there's always the exceptions to the rule that will go on and do crazy business. But and then it's really finding what that value is in the market, and a big component of that is talking with a distribution company to say, yes, we're looking at these elements and we think this is going to be worth X dollars. And then that way, these days more people are sort of backing into the budget based on what the feedback they're getting from the marketplace is. There's so many different ways of doing it, but I think to establish what the value is and then making the film for basically what that is, or less, is, it sounds, sort of, common sense, but too often that kind of gets lost in the mix. So from our point of view, we're looking for collateral as a lender. So just like banks do mortgages, it's the same thing here. We're looking for those distribution rights, sales of those distribution rights, and tax credits that we can lend against, we can monetize, and we're generally lending 90 to 100% of the value of those things. And then whatever's left unsold in terms of distribution rights, or whatever deal you have on the distribution, whether it's theatrical and any other ancillary rights, that's where you're going to go and try and appeal to the equity investor who's in it for a longer term, but for different reasons is happy to do that. So for me, it's all about establishing that value, and then showing the financiers where's the exit strategy. How do you get repaid over what period of time? Yeah. And it sounds obviously, a lot of filmmakers don't want to sit and talk about that sort of financial side of things, but again, a good producer will be able to have a good idea of how that's going to work out.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you brought up the collateral piece of it. Spike Lee, obviously, with the grandmother funding it, the reason why he's on my mind recently, I just interviewed him, had a sit down with him, and he says there's people today. She's Got to Have It in 1986. He says today people still collect checks. Those investors are still collecting checks from She's Got to Have It, like all those years down the line.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say the other thing I'll add on that point is that when banks make loans for these films, the good news is we're not looking for any personal guarantees from any of the filmmakers. So we have to make sure we're doing our job right, and that's why we're pushing the producer to get the package right in terms of we're strictly basing it on the value of the project itself. So that's why it's a good idea to kind of think that through ahead of time.
All right. Well, one key question that I know you spoke about, again, back to the collateral piece for a minute. If my name is Jessica Salas and I'm making I want to make a movie, I'm just out of college, I'm 21 years old. I mean, I have a lot of collateral to kind of throw out there. John Singleton famously, got nominated for an Oscar, Boys in the Hood. He was 24 years old at a film school, but it's an anomaly in those things. How can they also compete when they're so young?
Well, I mean, the great thing, just following on from what I was saying, is we're not pulling an individual's FICO score and saying, oh yeah, no, your credit is doesn't look so good or whatever. Again, it's all based on the project. If you've got a script, if you got a good script, and you can get it over the hurdles in terms of a producer and the talent and any other financing, and selling distribution rights and things, then we'll make you a loan. We're not, we've done over the years, done a lot of loans with first-time producers or inexperienced producers, because it's not really about so much, their financial wherewithal. It's just about the quality of the project.
And Luke, maybe you could speak to this point, because I know we have a lot of young people here on this call with us today, but we also have some established people that have made films and they have them in hand, taking them to festivals and getting good word, and then there's a famous term in the industry, they get shelved or they just don't have a home. One prominent example I think of is Margaret by Kenneth Lonergan, that didn't get released for 13 years, and then when it got released, we saw a younger Matt Damon than he is now. But some projects just can't get that, they just end up in this little pothole, so to speak. What happens in those situations? What if someone has a film, it's made already, so they're not looking, they're just trying to get it out there? What other things can they be doing there?
That's a great question. I would say that you're probably going to run into, more often than you have that particular issue in terms of something being shelved, you're probably going to run into, there's going to be a lot of things that you create in your career that for whatever reason in that exact moment cannot go. There's a completed script. It's a short film that you're trying to adapt into a feature-length film. It's any number of things, right? I say often, life is short and careers are long. There are just some moments where it's you will really hit a wall for whatever reason at that moment. That doesn't mean that you're not going to come back to it. And I think that a lot of that also has to do with thinking in terms of you and your career and scaling up, not necessarily on budget level either, because bigger does not mean better in terms of quality of film, but just scaling up in terms of what you have access to and the resources that are available to you. I think as young filmmakers, you really have to think about, okay, maybe you wrote the coolest $100 million sci-fi movie and you want to go direct that. If it's your first film, you're not getting that made. That's, it just is that way. And that's how the business works. And you have, that's where, film is unique in that the artists that are involved really have to think about the business. I in my mind, I think more than almost any other medium, just because it's such a expensive art form to pursue in and of itself. It's expensive to make a film. So yes, I would say in terms of something being shelved, I personally haven't. I mean, those are usually pretty rare situations that are bound up in litigation in terms of a completed film that is, for whatever reason, sitting in one place. But I do think that everyone on this call at some point or another in your career, no matter if you're wildly successful or not, you are going to come up to a point where you're going to have something that you really love that you feel like should go right now. And in your mind, it's obvious. Why wouldn't somebody finance this movie right now? Why wouldn't a studio make this movie right now? Why would it, fill in the blank? Yeah. Sometimes those things won't move forward, and sometimes you will be able to come back to them in a really exciting way. There's plenty of stories. Dallas Buyers Club was a script that has been around for
a long time. Yeah,
a long time. It was written. If you guys have seen it, the main character passed away in real life. I think in '93 or '94 or something, and the script was written within 2 years of that. Yeah. And then it went around, and it was like every single actor in Hollywood at some point or another was attached to play the role that ultimately Matthew McConaughey played. So it's one of those things where there is absolutely the right time, right place for certain things, and you have to read the market. You have to have a great team around you as well, with producers, with representatives when you're at that point as well. Just kind of knowing how to navigate all of those situations, and I would think about too, when you're thinking about what you want to pursue and approach as your first film and as the first thing that you want to mount, think about making something small that makes a lot of impact, because those are the resources that are going to be more readily available to you, as opposed to, you have a $25 million big world building kind of thing that you need Ryan Gosling to be in, or else you are not going to get it made, because that's tough. That's an uphill battle for you.
I think elephant in the room, I think to talk about this is COVID-19, the pandemic. How is all this, this is all great in theory, but Hollywood is really trying to get off the ground again. And, there's a lot of things starting and stopping and starting again, and a gajillion pushbacks. Like, what kind of time is it right now? Is there a lot of fear out there, or are people just kind of going, Adrian, like, is there anything during this time that banks are doing to help during that process?
I think the word that I hear more than anything is frustration. Because obviously, without getting into the political side of things, this should have been dealt with by now. We should be up and running by now. People should be going to the theaters. Production should be going, wherever they want, and not subject to, all this uncertainty. So, I think, in some ways, for the independent business, I think there are some silver linings. A lot of projects have had to sort of, force, obviously, just to stop in their tracks, but people have been refining the script, or they've been looking at the elements again and playing around with that, or just, adjusting the, what they're going to do on the physical production side when they can get going. And I've got a couple of producers who have retooled their entire production and managed to sort of save, what was like a $2.4 million budget. Now they can make the same film for 1.7. So all of a sudden it becomes a much better financial model for them. So, there are some bright spots. And like I said earlier, a number of producers have been looking outside of the US to go shoot their filming in Canada, or Australia and other countries where they have COVID insurance coverage provided by the government, or have just had a better experience of dealing with the whole virus itself. So you've got to keep looking forward, but I sincerely hope by this time next year that this sort of flood of productions is underway, and certainly it's a good time. Doesn't feel like it, but it's a good time in that we've got each of these streamers. Netflix was meant to spend $20 billion this year on new productions, so they're chomping at the bit to get out there. And then you multiply that by Amazon and Hulu and Apple and Peacock and YouTube and maybe Quibi. You've got all these, all that capital that's going to come into the market, and they're all looking for different things. They're all looking for originality and things that have an impact in different ways. So I think it's just sit tight, and then there'll be some opportunities around the corner.
Do you guys get a sense that there's gonna be like this flood, like whenever day this is, and they're like, okay, everything's fine, everyone's back to normal. Do you think at that minute, like the gates open, and I'm sure creative juices have been flowing, people are making COVID movies at home. I mean, Netflix bought Malcolm and Marie. Like, are you guys just ready for the influx of like, I have the best idea ever here? Give me some stuff. Like, it's just gonna be a lot of that.
Yeah, I think there'll be a ton of that. I mean, I think the limiting factor is going to be, finding, places to shoot and crew to come to the set, because it's going to be, literally hundreds of productions. I heard the other day that there's 40 plus productions that are about to get going in Vancouver, so, that's, there's great crew up there, but there's not enough for 40 productions. So, there'll be some fighting over this for sure.
Yeah, I read a article recently with John Sloss of Cinetic Media said that he's sitting on 400 films that, and like whatever distributors want to buy and put out, like I have them, like 400 just sitting in hand, ready to just like start dealing out. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there, and everyone's just kind of waiting for like kind of that right time to pounce. Like, I think that's a good way to put it. Looking a little bit at the relationships that they do form with you, if I've lended with you before, or referrals, there's the importance of those relationships. That's Skylar Davidson. I think she's making this great little thing. Like, how helpful are those referrals, those relationships, or is it really just the bottom line of like what the financial impact would be? I didn't know if you could speak to that, if there was like some of that networking that is really the big piece that we need to embrace. It's for either of you.
Yes, the answer is yes. Networking is always the most important. Hollywood has the stereotype, if it's not what it's who you know, which isn't entirely true by any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely plays a part. And I do think that also carries over into financial relationships too, business relationships. If you as a filmmaker are known to be a person who delivers on the script that you have set out, and you and your production team, a lot of times it's a little bit more about producer in terms of like delivering on budget, etc. But that's, the producer is speaking on behalf of the filmmaker with that as well, and knowing what can get made. There is absolutely an element of, if I know that Adrian has worked with a filmmaker before and I'm looking at working with that filmmaker, I'm definitely picking up the phone and calling Adrian and just saying, well, what was your experience on this? What was that? It's a constant thing, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's
also about honing that moment when you do get that opportunity. Make sure it's like it's golden. Like, cherish it. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's a question that came from somebody, but I think it's more for all of us. From Anthony Torres said, would you recommend to try and get a deal with streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon, or should first timers self-produce on YouTube and or Vimeo or other services like that? And I mean, it was for me, but I'm gonna let you guys answer too. I think kind of whatever fits within your timeline. I mean, like Netflix, I think is a great distributor of diverse voices. I mean, they're letting like so many different voices, make and say, they let Alfonso Cuarón make a big heavy silent film about a maid in Mexico in the 1970s, and then just said go. So I'd say there are a lot of streamers. All the streamers are just open to these kind of diverse voices. But I mean, if you're looking for something, I guess, more immediate, then yeah, YouTube and Vimeo. You can get some stuff that way. I mean, I think one of the famous stories was the guy who made a reboot of Mortal Kombat and threw it on YouTube. And what his vision of Mortal Kombat would look like, and then like it took off into something. We're supposed to get a Mortal Kombat movie this January, quote unquote. But there's I think it's just kind of what fits within your timeline. Adrian and Luke, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever gets your voice heard in whatever way is probably a good thing. I mean, and if you've got things that you can put out on YouTube and and other platforms like that, do it, because that might be the calling card that you need to get into the through the door at Netflix or somewhere else. But at the same time, I think you've got to, you've got to try all the different avenues, and that's probably, one of the downsides is that it's difficult to get through some of those doors sometimes. But that's why you've got to be very consistent, very persistent at the same time. But I think anything that sets you apart, or gives you a platform to showcase what you can do or what you're trying to do, whether it's getting a script to an agent or whatever it might be, you've got to do it. Because the great thing about the independent business right now is that the studios have retreated to a very narrow, small little, bit of the business where it's these huge, blockbuster movies. And so the landscape for independence, I think, is much bigger. But there are more producers, at this time than any time I've certainly seen in the business. So there's more competition. So, like Luke was saying earlier, you do have to make an impact. You do have to set yourself apart. But all those things, all those social media platforms, it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, got it. Luke, I want to go back to. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
One thing to that, I also think in terms of if you're talking about actually getting a feature made, it's probably neither of those options, I would say, because I think, again, like as Adrian said, that Netflixes and the Hulus and the Amazons of those, they have it is very difficult to get into them, right, and to be able to directly pitch them, especially as a first-time filmmaker. And as somebody who is yet to be kind of have your voice and them seeing like what the finished product will be in any number of things, your first feature will probably be some version of independently putting it together. So it could be grandma giving you the money in conjunction with going to Banc of California and getting part of that as debt, in addition to relocating to Iceland or wherever has the best tax incentive. It's going to be some version of that. And then when you are at the level of Cuarón, when you are at the level of Scorsese, when you are at the level of something like that, or even earlier than that, obviously they are like film deities, but you could even be more on the way there. I think the Netflixes, the Hulus, the Amazons, as well as the traditional studios, Fox not Fox, but Disney and Warner Brothers and Universal and Sony and everything like that, they're going to be much more willing to engage and figure all of that out. So I think the first thing is going to be scrappy, and it's probably going to be something that frankly you don't want to repeat again because it's going to be more complicated, but it's also going to get you there, which is really nice.
I think it's good that you say that, because I think we as people love the Cinderella stories. Like, we hear about the first time filmmakers. We pay attention to, like, when Sam Mendes made American Beauty and won Best Picture. Like, that's where we always associate, like, oh, that's gonna be my big impact. But we don't hear about the scrappy, kind of thrown together, movies that happen. Spike made something before She's Gotta Have It that he said didn't really, go well. A lot of people don't know that. So it's interesting that you bring that. Going back,
a really good thing to do in any moment where you are not bored, because this isn't even a boredom thing. This is a cool thing to do. Any filmmaker you're obsessed with, I've been doing this during quarantine. Any filmmaker you're obsessed with, go back and watch their first movie. And actually trace their career, really dive into it, look at their whole filmography and their whole background, and really look at how they got to wherever you hopped on the train, whether it's their most recent movie, or maybe you loved them for 15 years, but you just missed the first, or whatever that is. Think about that. How does Chris Nolan get to Tenet? How does Cuarón get to Roma? Think about that and start to put those pieces together, because I think it is very rare that even some of the most famous filmmakers that people are really going back and thinking like, okay, that was their first movie. I understand. You can kind of start to piece together like what they did and the choices they made creatively and on the business side to get where they ultimately ended up. Because I think way too many people focus on only where they ultimately ended up. Sure.
Great. Just back to you, Luke, and I think you started touching on it before about, like, Sundance Labs and things like that. But I think it's good to talk about some of those crowdfunding sources that they can look to. Kickstarter obviously is like probably the most famous one of all. Zach Braff made his second movie off a Kickstarter after he made Garden State, because Garden State was great, and could not get the money for a second movie as well as it did. But I know there's some few others like, Indiegogo, causes, patrons, big thing, GoFundMe, is another big one, Circle Up. Is there any more that you can like talk to or recommend? Obviously, Adrian, you've probably seen a few different things. Like how successful has those crowdfunding sources have been, and how should it really be pitched?
I don't have any others to add to the ones that you just said. Those are the ones that I am definitely aware of. I think I'll take an example of a movie that I worked on, and then Adrian, I definitely hand this over to you because this is more your domain as well. But I think, Zach Braff having the platform that Zach Braff has enabled him to production finance his movie off of Kickstarter. And when I say production finance your movie, I mean literally it takes, I can't remember how much that movie was made for, but let's say it was a $5 million movie. It means he's raising probably $5.5 million, because obviously all these places are going to take fees off the top. Go and double check that. Go look into that before you pursue anything with them. But for more emerging filmmakers, because Zach Braff had already done Scrubs Forever, and he had done, he'd done Garden State. So he was very much so a known entity at that time and had a fan base. As you're starting, a great thing to think about is doing development financing, right? And having something where it basically gets you, and what I say, why I say that is it's going to be a much lower sum of money, and it's going to be something where it's actually something you can do something with, right? So you're not going to all of your friends and saying, hey, I'm trying to raise $5 million. Will you pitch in? Which I know I have a lot of friends that they would not write $5 million worth of checks for me. So I that's not something that is typical in terms of people who aren't already known and have fan bases and everything like that. Think about, though, if you can utilize it for some kind of development spend. There was a movie that I worked on when I was at CAA called The Last Black Man in San Francisco. The filmmaker, Joe Talbot, who is phenomenally talented, he and Jimmy Fails, who is the star of the movie and also loosely based off of his life as well, the movie. They used, I cannot remember if it was Kickstarter or Indiegogo or which crowdfunding website, but you can Google it and it's there, and you can look at all of this, but they used it to go and raise funds to be able to go and write the script, and also to be able to put together a short that then, that's when I came into Joe's life and worked with him to then go and get the feature financed and set up and able to then go and be made, and ultimately went last year to 2 years ago to Sundance, and had a successful journey with that. But that was something where Joe did not seek out, the production budget of his film from Kickstarter. He instead sought out some tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. I can't remember exactly what the number was, but he got enough to be able to go and have a short in hand and a feature-length script of this is what the movie is.
So don't sleep on the shorts, is what you're saying.
Huh?
You say don't sleep on the shorts. Like, the shorts can lead the best. I mean, I think Damien Chazelle did the same thing with Whiplash. Took the short version of Whiplash to Sundance, and then that birth after that. Skin, same thing. Awesome. Just real quick, guys, and I'm going to let you close out this portion of it, Adrian, but I just want to let everyone know. So in about 10 minutes, we're going to go to the audience Q&A portion, okay? So if you want to ask a question, you're going to click raise hand in the participants tab to be placed in the queue. Got to put some reminders here. Remember, limit yourself to just one question, and please, for the love of God, do not pitch any ideas during this time. All right, that's what the internet's for, right? So this is legit question stuff. Please do not pitch your idea on this thing. All right, just questions only. Thank you, Adrian. Your final thoughts on this, and then we'll go to the Q&A.
So it's just to follow on from what Luke was saying on the the sort of crowdfunding thing. I mean, in my experience, I found that for trying to fund a movie, it's very difficult. I think you have to have a platform like Zach Braff, or it's got to be something that's known in some way, shape, or form, or it's just incredibly crazy. And the reason I say that is that we we were close to co-financing a film that had raised some money on, I think it was on GoFundMe, that was for a film called Eye in the Sky, or it may have actually been Eye in the Sky 2, which is basically the premise of that was that the Nazis had moved to the moon, and then they were reinvading planet Earth on the back of dinosaurs. And it was just so far out there.
I want this movie. Wait, no, you can't just drop that and just like move on. Wait, what?
Look it up. I think that there was certainly
There's an Eye in the Sky. There's an Eye in the Sky movie that's like the Helen Mirren one that I remember.
That's what I'm thinking too. I was like,
wait, what?
Helen Mirren and Aaron Paul.
Yeah. I mean, that premise alone, I think, I'd put $10 into that. I mean,
I will give them $5,000 if they make that tomorrow. Like, I want to see that movie on the backs of dinosaurs. I'm sorry, go ahead. This is great.
But I think, but outside of those, relatively few exceptions, I think it's, because you don't know going in what's going to happen, there's sort of a bit of an unended sort of time frame on it. And you might get to your goal, you may not, but are you going to raise your production budget through this? Probably not. I think, like Luke said, it's probably better for something where you're limiting it to a relatively small amount of money specific to development or specific to, whatever it might be. But in my experience, the time invested is maybe not, it stacks up so well against, the going down other roads with potential investors or, whatever it might be. But it is an interesting component. And, we certainly were thinking that there would be more elements of that in some, in independent filmmaking, but it seems to sort of hit a bit of a peak and then it sort of leveled off. But for certain projects and certain, things, it might be totally appropriate.
Awesome. All right. So we're now down to the Q&As, right? So I believe I'm going to be placed to the queue. I'll be fed some questions here. Thank you for the great discussion, Adrian and Luke. Adrian, your one job, like after this, is just to go make that movie. Like me and Luke will not accept anything less than next summer.
Truly, I need so much more information.
It's going to be Jurassic World Dominion and Nazis on backs of dinosaurs. Like, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait for it.
Oh my God.
Oof. Again, for the Q&A, you raise your hand. You raise your hand, and then in the participants tab to be placed in the queue. And then again, just remember one question.
Yep.
Please.
Thanks,
right.
Clayton. Thank you. So first up, we have Lorenzo from Cal State Long Beach. So Lorenzo, I'm going to ask to unmute you right now.
Hello.
Hi, Lorenzo.
Oh, so first of all, thank you so much for having this. This has been incredibly helpful. I'm sure a lot of us know about the story of Robert Rodriguez, who famously made his first movie with $7,000 of his own, made the movie, and then pitched it from there with this finished movie. Is that avenue still viable of making a movie on your own money and then looking for a distributor, or is that kind of not available anymore? Or not viable?
I would say that's absolutely available. I mean, I think the the technology that's available to people now, is so good and so relatively inexpensive, depending on what you can get your hands on, that you can make a viable movie for relatively speaking, not a lot of money, maybe not $7,000 these days, but you grab a bunch of friends from film school or whatever it might be and shooting a movie. To me, I see that more often than probably any other thing. And then you've got a film, and you can get it into festivals, you can submit it wherever you want. I mean, obviously a lot of people are doing that. So again, there's more competition and than there used to be. But having a completed movie, the concept of having a completed movie and then looking for distribution is ultimately what the distributors want. What they generally don't want to do, and that's sort of the business I'm in a little bit more of, is pre-buying rights based on the premise or based on the script or based on who might be in the movie and the director and that sort of thing. And they're sort of trying to project forward. But if they've got a finished film that they can screen and say, yeah, this is great, then you're that much closer to getting distribution.
Yeah, I would also assume that like from the investor standpoint, I mean, that's not, you're not having to put up any money or the risk of, maybe this guy is going to be bad or terrible or great, like you already, based on what you see it, you'll get your answer in that finished product. Wouldn't I figure that'd be attractive, right? Like to anyone?
Yes, I mean, there's no risk. They're
Yeah.
watching a completed movie. The two caveats I would give to that, and this is very much so like another thing that goes into the fable, or not fable, but like the urban legends of like Lena Dunham getting something made off of a cocktail napkin, or Robert Rodriguez making a movie for $7,000. Do not spend more than you have to lose, because there is nothing wonderful about being an emerging filmmaker with hundreds of thousands of dollars of credit card debt. That's something that you don't want to go into in service of your art. You'll notice even as Adrian is talking, I feel like my mother speaking right now, but even as Adrian is talking, like when he's talking about like dispensing a loan to a film, they're not going to have anybody personally guarantee that. You should also not be in the habit of personally forking out money for a movie. Now, obviously you can always bet on yourself. And if it's a rational risk to take, if it's the right size, then you have to make that decision for yourself. But yeah, don't go and do that thing, because for every great and successful story there is about that, there's 100 that are not good and not successful. The other piece of it that I would say, if you have a $7,000 movie, that's great and that works. What you don't want to end up with is this movie clearly needed to be quite a bit more expensive than this. So then you end up with something that is not, basically something that isn't professional, something where they're going to look at it and they're go, okay, this is a completed film, but like, we can't put this on Netflix. We can't put this on Hulu. We can't.
It's that saying, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, exactly. So Robert Rodriguez paying $7,000 for a $7,000 movie really works. But if Robert Rodriguez had, paid $7,000 to make a movie that clearly needed to be $500,000, then he's going to end up, not getting something else after that. So it depends on what it is that you are seeking to make and whether or not that can work. But yes, there are definitely it definitely can. All of this negativity aside, there absolutely are the right avenues in which that can work.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you, Luke. We always love those good success stories. Next question.
Great. So I just wanted to say there's a lot of hands raised. So just to reiterate, only one question, please. Keep it a one question. And to reiterate, Clayton said, for God's sake, do not pitch yourself. I just don't want that happening. So up next
Turn off my camera.
Up next is Yuan. Yuan, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Okay. So my name is Yuan Sun. And my question is that I'm a Master of Finance student. So I want to begin my career in film financing and entertainment banking. Do you have any suggestions on that?
That's a good question. I think, obviously the community of lenders, certainly institutional lenders in film or entertainment in general, is pretty small. The good thing about that is that you can identify them pretty quickly. So what I would do is, make a list of those banks, that obviously most of them are out here in LA. There's a few back east and, and elsewhere. And then I would try and, meet with some of the people there, or at least submit a resume, because there's a fair bit of turnover in some of those banks, and some of the larger banks, obviously they employ, pretty big staff. So, they may well have openings for people at different levels. So I would just, become familiar with the players and then see if you can, make yourself known to them and go from there.
Okay,
and I would add to that one other place that you could go, and this is obviously biased because this is exactly what I did, but you could also start at one of the agencies. It would have to be one of the bigger agencies, but the CAA, WME, UTA, ICM, and Paradigm, and Gersh, and maybe a few others as well, but those are really the big ones in terms of they have a film financing department So that's a great way for you to work your way up. Obviously, your first job anywhere you're going to be is probably going to be an assistant level position. But that's a great place for you to get your feet wet, learn who everybody is, kind of understand how everything operates and works, and whether or not you ultimately want to stay there and become an agent or go somewhere else. You are building connections within the the world of independent finance and international finance and everything like that. So that's another, especially as an entry level thing, that's a great avenue to pursue.
Yeah, and just to speak also just quickly to publicity side too. I mean, like Justin Simeon, who made Dear White People, was in publicity. Ava DuVernay started there, and they learned, and Ava DuVernay now runs her own production company. So yeah, any avenue to start, and then just work your way through the industry. You're gonna meet a ton of people. Use it to your advantage. Great. Next question.
Awesome. Next up is Zamir from Cal State Long Beach. So Zamir, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Samir.
Hello, thanks for having us. Earlier you spoke about the first idea as a newcomer and making impactful content. Can you elaborate on what kind of impactful content also aligns with the newcomer's budget?
Yes, I will. I think it's a super subjective question. So not question, it's a super subjective answer. So there obviously is not a tried and true method where it's like, well, this is what a first timer is allowed to make. I think, again, like thinking about you as a creative and you as a filmmaker and how you want to pursue it, and thinking of the balance of what you want versus what you need and what you have to give away in order to get that, right? And that's a lot of the same balance of like, does this movie need to be $100 million? Then probably not now, and that kind of thing. I think that for me, the thing that really separates people out is just really making something with a very specific point of view, right? And like really owning your voice and really making it indicative of who you want to be as a filmmaker, so that even if it is a smaller version of it, if you want to end up making, the $200 million studio movies that we're talking about, we still understand that you're going to progress to being this as that kind of larger filmmaker. So unfortunately, there's not a tried and true method, but yeah, I would just think about like, what is the best version of a small and manageable bite of who you are as a filmmaker and a storyteller.
Awesome. Next question.
Great. Next up, we have Alex from New York Film Academy. So Alex, I'm going to ask you to unmute you.
New York. That'd be great. I have big expectations.
Hey guys, again, Alex Liggins. I'm an actor, get my master's degree, and I'll have that by this December. I want to thank New York Filmmakers LA as well as the Academy for bringing this on. So I really appreciate you guys. After hearing literally thousands of pitches in your lifetime, putting aside the business of, this film will make money and the budget is fine, what do you look for in that pitch from that person when they are pitching you that film? What is that one specific thing, or I should probably better say, what is the commonality? What is the similarity that you see in the pitches that do get put on and do get funded as opposed to the ones who don't when money isn't a factor?
Well, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that that not only that I've sort of seen in people, but has generally been a good weather vane of, people ultimately being successful. There's probably two things. One is that people who come through the door and know their limitations. They're not saying everything that they think I want to hear. They're saying, this is what I'm good at, and here are the things I'm not so good at, and that's when I'm going to get somebody else to do that thing. Because somebody who comes through the door and says, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and it's impossible. You can't be a writer, producer, director, actor, everything else. So you've got to understand your limitations. And I think the other thing is then when you recognize that, it's then finding good people to put in those positions to get you where you want to be. you know, and generally being persistent about it. I mean, I think, you know, like you say, you know, do see a lot of projects, meet a lot of people, but what I remember about people are the people that will learn from the conversation they're having with me or with a sales agent or whoever it is, and then they will come back and say, okay, I took your advice, this part of it, or that part of it, and now I'm this much further forward. And I think those qualities are really important, you know, and rather than just saying what, you know, you think people want to hear.
Alex, I just want to say, because your question was so good, recall a conversation I had with Steve Gollan, the late Steve Gollan. He was producer of Spotlight and The Revenant. And it was during the Spotlight year, and I had a lunch with him in promoting the film. And I talked to him about, like, you know, projects, like the diversity of projects. And he had said something that was pretty poignant. And he said, it was very clear. He was like, do you know how many pitches I hear that I actually think are the most amazing ideas, but I can't make them all. So he's like, sometimes it's just timing, and sometimes it's the passion of someone that will give me the drive to be like, all right, I'll do this one next. So I think if you bleed for your art, like, let it be known, like, that you're really serious about this. Like, people know I love film and movies because I don't stop reminding people of it. So don't be afraid to do that.
Say it with your chest. Say it with your chest. Next up, we have Ruth. Ruth, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Ruth.
So, I don't bleed for my art, but I might kill for it.
I'll take that.
Can we make t-shirts of that?
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Adrian, I have a specific question for you following up from what Yuan had asked. So I would like to email you after this, but I'm afraid you're going to get a lot of them. So where can we find banks that do finance films? I'm in Miami, and I'm a Wells Fargo customer. So for example, do the big banks have a division, all of them, or should, you know, is there a list somewhere? Because I've been Googling since she asked that question, and I'm not finding the list.
Yeah, I don't know whether there is a list. There used to be. There's an organization called IFTA, which is the International Film and Television Association. They're the group that puts on the American film market every year, and most of their members are distribution companies, but they also have a finance section as well. And there are some banks that are in there, but it's a short list. I mean, you know, really quickly, the bigger banks are generally doing bigger pieces or pieces of the big syndicated loans to, you know, the big companies and studios. So for production financing, you're talking, you know, Banc of California, Comerica Bank, City National Bank, Union Bank, East West Bank, First Republic got out of it, Bank Leumi got out of it, Opus Bank's got out of it. So those 5 banks are probably the ones where, you know, that are doing the majority of it, independent production financing for you know, individual productions.
Thank you for your question. Next
up, we have Emmanuel from Cal State, Los Angeles. So I'm going to ask to unmute you, Emmanuel.
Hi. This is actually following up question from Ruth, actually, because it would help for the question that she did. And this is for something that Adrian Ward said regarding that there have been cases where first-time producers do get finance for their projects. What would be the best way for a first-time producer or a director to approach the bank or the investor representative for the finance of our project? Like any do's and don'ts when we're pitching our project that you may have for us?
I think I go back to what I said earlier about, you know, having you know, bringing a producer on board. I mean, we're always, you know, we're always happy to have conversations with anybody, you know, just to sort of put something on the radar. But I think, you know, unless you as the director or the writer, whatever it may be, has a very clear picture of how the thing is going to get financed. I think bringing a producer on board will certainly accelerate that process. And certainly if it's a producer that's been down the road previously with financiers of different kinds, then, not only will it accelerate it, but there's a good chance that they've got some connections that, they can go and, find some money. I mean, banks tend to be pretty, approachable. You call them up and say, can I speak to your entertainment group, and you can have a conversation. But finding equity investors and or mezzanine lenders and things like that, it's a little more, I would say it's certainly easier if you're engaging with a producer who's got those relationships already.
Awesome. TJ has his hand raised, but he just put in the chat he's going to submit his question here. So I'm just going to go ahead in the meantime, call him next person. So next up is actually Sean. So Sean, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Hello.
I hear you, Sean.
All right, thank you. So I am looking at a reality competition show. And so if you have experience with reality series, are those funds made, if you have funded them, are those funds made toward development, let's say like producing a pilot, or is it possible to get funding for a full slate of shows?
Good question.
Yeah, so we've generally financed, if you turn on the Hallmark channel and there's 300 Christmas movies on the Hallmark channel, we've probably financed a good chunk of those. So we haven't come across a lot of sort of reality TV programming, because mostly that sort of cash flowed out of there's a company that's production company involved, and given that the budgets of those shows can historically have been relatively small, depending on what it is, obviously. So you've either got a larger number of small independent production companies cash flowing those, or you've got a smaller number of large production companies, whether it's Fremantle or Psycho Entertainment, the guys that are in that business already, that that are behind the the larger formats. So it's not to say that we couldn't be involved with that, but again, I don't think that historically that business is one where broadcasters pre-buy distribution rights like they do with the sort of scripted TV shows like you see on Hallmark or Sci-Fi Channel and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's that's a slightly different model, and that's something where you would need to get you'd need to walk through the door of one of those production companies that again hopefully you've got a format that stands out, but they're kind of the gatekeeper for that stuff.
All right, thank you.
And don't make the Kardashians.
No,
that's also a rule.
I don't even watch it.
All right, good.
My personal guilty pleasure, but it's okay. I'm just new filmmaker. So next up we have Jessica. Jessica, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
It's my wife's name. I hope that's not her.
Hi, thank you for taking
Jeff.
So my question is, what would be the best approach or advice that you will give to us young filmmakers or that want to be in the industry to get a film producing career in the industry?
Specifically, you want to be the producer? Work for a producer. You're not going to be, I think that there's, when you're starting out, there's kind of it's not even a hubris. It makes logical sense, but especially if you're a producer and you have a producer's mindset, there's kind of this idea of, I want to go it on my own. I want to do the thing. I want to, I want the full producer credit. I want all these things, and no matter how much you think you don't know enough. Nobody ever does, really, frankly, but you always want to go and find a producer who is somewhat in the area that you want to ultimately also be in. Because again, there's producers who focus on $200 million studio movies. There's producers that, that have stayed in kind of the $5 million or under kind of Sundance or Festival Darling space. Seek those producers out, look at the people whose careers you would like to emulate, which requires a certain amount of research because producers are not usually that forward facing to people outside of the industry. It's not like an actor or director where, you know, people outside of the industry would necessarily know who that person is. But then, yeah, go and work for that person. It'll probably be a certain amount of coffee getting. That's always, that's inherent anywhere you start, whether it is publicity or an agency or a bank or what have you. But yeah, go and learn that craft and learn from somebody who's better than you so that it'll make you better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, a piece of advice I always heard, they always say, don't be this, if you're the smartest person in the room, get a new room.
Yes.
Like, find yourself with people that are I did it my whole life. Everyone's smarter than me.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Next up, we have Jonathan from New York Film Academy. Jonathan, I'm going to unmute you.
Let's go, John.
Hey, my name's Jonathan. I'm a master's acting student at New York Film Academy. And okay, this is a tricky one. So if you're fresh out of school, you've graduated and you want to get a film made, what type of substance do you need to bring to the table if you're talking to someone for the first time? Like, do you need a full treatment, a full script, just the pitch or the log line? Because I've heard of somebody scribbled something on a napkin and threw it out there and said, yeah, I'll fund this. But that person had something to their name. Like, what do you need? Because I'm a person that has way more ideas than they have completed scripts. And I'm like, I don't know where I'm going with this. But if somebody says, yeah, we'll make that movie, yeah, it's going to get done. Am I making any sense?
No, you are. You're describing me, by the way, but go ahead, Luke.
Write the script. Sorry, I know that's not the exciting answer, but that is the best. If I have somebody who comes up to me with a really good idea and I'm really impressed by it, we're introduced however we have come into contact and they come to me and they say I'm a first-time filmmaker or a younger filmmaker or what have you, and I have this really great idea, the next logical question is going to be, okay, where do I read it? I do not think by and large you're going to find many opportunities, unfortunately, where somebody's going to go, I really like that idea, and I'm going to give you some money to go and run with that a little bit, especially to begin. Once you're established, once you do have a name for yourself in terms of who you are as a producer, an actor, a director, whatever element you want to be, that will change. That will change in a big way. People will actually hurl money at you at a certain point once you have gained a level of success. But at the beginning, take it as far as you humanly can, flesh out the idea, think more through it. If you don't have a third act for the movie, I certainly don't have a third act for the movie. So you know, especially at the beginning, it's a massive hustle. And you know, for all of those ideas that you have that are great, it is a very rare opportunity that you will get. And I would say pretty close to a non-existent opportunity you'll get where somebody will go and flesh that out for you.
Yeah, and I think it disciplines you also, Jonathan. I mean, look. I mean, go back and look at any of the scripts from the Blacklist over the years. Terrence Winter had The Wolf of Wall Street on there from 2007 and didn't get made till 2013. You know, Social Network was on the Blacklist. Looper, Margin Call, like all these. You know, it really lets you really flesh out your idea and then you can build some, you know, good credibility and people start to trust it because it'll be on there. You know, it circles Hollywood. A lot of those things just circle around. So, yeah. Next question.
Great. So TJ actually just typed their question. It's, what's the best way to connect with producers?
Well, there's a lot of events throughout the year. You know, as we said earlier, I mean, there are festivals and markets in pretty much every city and every country. I also think, you know, you can do a lot of research on IMDb and some of the other databases in terms of, you know, what a producer's producing. And, you know, if you want to make a comedy or, you know, a certain type of movie, you can narrow it down to find producers sort of work in that sort of, you know, that specific genre. You know, again, it is competitive. So I think, you know, it's one of those things where to be prepared to give the elevator pitch in whatever, you know, format you can. I mean, or you know, people generally, the thing that I used to do when I started out in the industry and we were trying to bring deals through the door. I mean, my boss said, told me, everybody has to eat. So I started like hitting people up and taking them out to lunch, and that worked well, and you get a solid 45 minutes of talking with someone. So again, whatever means necessary, the networking thing, is huge in this industry. But I think most producers are generally, are fairly accessible if you're, you show them that you're willing to work hard, or you've got a project that, you want them to look at, because ultimately they need that. It's a machine, and you've got to feed that machine with ideas and people and, and scripts. So they do need it at some level, and it's just a question of getting access.
Yeah, and don't sleep on social media. Like, you don't know when, you follow someone, you say stuff to them, they scroll that one time, they see it, and that's it. So by any means necessary, just keep doing it.
So unfortunately, you might have time for only 2 more questions. I know I see quite a few hands up, but we'll see where we are after the second. So next up, we have Shay E. Shay E, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Hey, everyone. So my question is really, I think this is going back to the point of an independent filmmaker sort of coming in with everything prepared rather than coming in from the start, making a film actually, and coming in necessarily to collaborate rather than have someone like feed the project into life. So generally, if someone is going to complete their project as an independent filmmaker, what are some of the maybe distribution companies that you recommend for beginner filmmakers that are probably more lenient towards an independent project? Yeah, so that's my question.
Everybody. There's nobody. If you make a great piece of, probably the only company that may not acquire movies is Disney, only specifically Disney, because they tend to stay within their kind of like brand hubs of Marvel and Lucasfilm and I think Hamilton is the only thing that Disney, like big Disney, has bought in the last however many years. But in general, you make a great film, it could be literally anywhere. It could go full streaming, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu. It could go, Neon or A24 or Annapurna on the theatrical side, Fox Searchlight, of course, IFC. There's there is absolutely no limit. Everybody wants great content.
So I guess to probably narrow it down a little bit, what are more, so for example, we mentioned like Netflix, Hulu, or even Foxlight and things like that. But I know in the initial conversation, as we mentioned, those people are a little tougher to, probably get into, especially on a first project per se, especially if it's coming out as great content, cool. But, most likely they'll probably rather give a seat to someone else who already has the resume behind and things like that. So maybe, I guess, who are some lesser known distributors per se that are not
so if you've got a finished film, I mean, I would say, you can find specialist sales agents or an agency, whether it's CAA or, an individual, agents that have been in the business, and they will know exactly, here's the top 10 companies that we should screen this to. And they will generally make a list, there's 100 companies long, but they would say, okay, this type of film, this budget, this genre, and they're the best people to narrow it down, because they will have sold them films in the past. They will know the acquisitions, individuals at those companies. And so that's generally the most efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, okay. And especially when you go through film festivals, I mean, they screen it for industry buyers. They have industry screenings for that specific purpose that will just pick it up.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
I think we have one more question.
Yeah, we have time for one more. So that last question is going to Christian from Cal State Long Beach. Christian, let's make it good. I'm going to ask to unmute you right now.
What's the meaning of life? Right, Chris.
No pressure.
I'm going to lead with what's the meaning of life. No, but actually, thank you so much for this panel, and thank you to New Filmmakers. It's been enjoyable, valuable. It's been all the ables. But I had one particular question. You guys mentioned a particular pitfall or a potential trap that lots of people fall into in the formative years of their career, being credit card debt. And it just got me thinking about what are some other, potential self-imposed prisons that might seem like a artistic sacrifice, but it's really just a bad financial move for the production, for you, and for everybody involved.
I mean, the house, the heirlooms, there's also the emotional, I think, collateral, about how much, Adrian?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that the general rule of, ring fencing your personal assets against, what you want to do, in the film world is a smart move. I think also on the other side of that is when you're engaging with financiers, make sure you have a good lawyer on your side so that you're not, if you end up having a successful film, you're going to make some money out of it, and you're not going to lose, in that sort of scenario. And that you should always create standalone limited liability companies to house distribution rights and copyrights, so that you're sort of, sheltered from potential lawsuits personally and things like that. So a lot of it is common sense. I think a big part of it in general is having an experienced lawyer on your team, to avoid falling into those traps in the first place.
Thank you.
So with that, thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Luke, for doing this today at the panel. I'll give it over to NFMLA to wrap up everything, and thanks for having me as well.
Great. Thank you, Clayton, and thank you, Adrian and Luke. This was such an informative conversation, and I know everybody here appreciated it immensely. And thank you to all of you for coming out, for asking such good questions, and for being here. And if you want to come and enjoy our next panel, you can join us again at 5 p.m. for our Ryan Murphy Half Initiative panel with their program director, Shari Page. So we hope to see you back for that one. And until then, have a great night.
Can't wait to review all your movies.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.